when a player gets under pressure in some way, that is the same experience for them as, say, coming across a snake on a path. And so from an evolutionary point of view, our brain and our responses are similar to being in that sort of really life-threatening situation. And so in that case, if I come across a snake, then the first response would be to freeze, and so hopefully that snake won't see me. And so in that case, we get the physiological response of like muscle tightening and so forth. But then from an attentional point of view, our attention would then narrow onto the dangerous point of view. So our perception then would be sort of drawn onto the snake in that situation, the dangerous thing, to see what that snake's doing. Like our thoughts would race to try to solve the problem, think about what can I do to get out of here. So within a sports setting, I mean, those for me would be a couple of important ones where when we under pressure, we tend to start to focus on the dangerous aspects of losing. Our thoughts tend to get dragged onto the possibility of losing. Our thoughts tend to race, so we probably get lots of thoughts about the dangerous thing. And we would also tend to probably get really self-focused in those circumstances as well. So it's hardest for us to just maintain attention on the actual helpful thing that we need to do that's going to help us increase the chance of success. So, so there are a few things I think of.
If it's a pretty even match in terms of skill and weapons, often the player who wins ends up being the one that navigates through the match a little better tactically and figures out quicker what the opponent's weaknesses are and how to exploit those weaknesses. So that obviously requires a little bit of thought during the match and at the changeovers, in terms of matching up your strengths versus their weaknesses and making sure that the points unfold that way and not the other way around. So I find often when a player's stressed or they're angry or their body language has deteriorated or they're not handling the pressure well, sometimes the problem-solving ability goes out the window. And you'll talk to them after the match and say, hey, did you recognise that the backhand was a lot weaker than the forehand, or that they were serving to this spot all the time on every big point? And often really good players will get into that space where they just don't pick it up. What you would think would be pretty standard, pretty obvious things, sometimes they miss it. And then that's going to definitely affect the outcome of the match. So that's the area I would say it affects the most in our sport, is that inability to problem solve when you lose a bit of your composure.
I guess when I'm sort of walking to the marshalling room, say, for the final of the Olympics, let's use that one. Everything is, for me, very very quiet, very so focused. It's ridiculous. I'm trying to be as relaxed as possible and just not try to feel too much at that point. But you're walking. You subconsciously know what you're about to do. You're about to swim an Olympic final. Like there's no. You can't just turn it off. Like you can block it out to a degree, but your body is well aware, and obviously nerves and all this sort of stuff is coming on. But as you're doing that, we walk into the marshalling room. It's quiet. You've got these 7 other guys that are about to do the exact same thing as you, and I guess you're in this room, and it's very intense. I mean, everyone's trying to do the exact same thing, win the race. So, I normally just sit there and just try and control any aspect that I feel is uncontrollable pressure, and that's things that I ultimately can't control. There could be a guy psyching himself up in the corner, hitting himself. That's not going to help me by being intimidated by that. It's only making me see that he's actually quite scared of the race and he's trying to take his mind off by doing something else. So you can use what's going on around you to your advantage by flipping it in a way that will help you. And And you can literally cut the tension. You talk about these sorts of situations where people are feeling pressure, and this room is just, I'm sure every room for a final at a major competition is the same. And I think when you're able to concentrate on just your lane and your abilities, you then become a level above the other athletes, and that's very hard to do. To go into a race and not be concerned about what other athletes are doing is very tough. But as soon as you're able to block that out, that's when you become an impressive racer.
Well, how athletes deal with pressure and how that affects their ability to perceive information is very individualised, I believe. And I think a lot of some of the athletes we work with who, as I said, might revel in the pressure that they're put under, and probably if they're put under pressure, then they're not overthinking about the decisions they have to make and the movements they make. They just kind of do it, which allows them to be more automatic, and we know that that's a benefit. But then there are some athletes who, under pressure, start to overthink or not trust their own initial movements, and that tends to lead to a lessening in performance, and in particular, simple skills become very complicated. So the ability to trap a ball in hockey, or the ability to make a correct pass in water polo, or make a correct decision on who to pass to, can become a very complex decision if you're under stress or pressure. And so I think that's something that is very individual, and there are some athletes, as I said, that will really love the moment and step up for the occasion. And often it's sometimes surprising who they are. Often we don't expect the person who steps up to step up. And that's obviously a nice surprise for us in the field.
Isn't it? But if you went to an Andrew Simons, for instance, Andrew was one of our classic, what we call mozzies, who, if you gave him detail, if you gave him, sit him down at a team meeting and say, well, here's a list of things that are really important today that we need to actually put in place as part of our game plan, Andrew would be asleep in 10 seconds. And those first 10 seconds was about getting to sleep. So none of that would have gone in. So what we needed to do with Andrew was understanding the game plan. Now, when we go to prepare, when we go to actually do something, that's how we get Andrew to understand what's required. So just through the process of doing for him, gave him great understanding of what was expected. And other people like a Matthew Hayden, for instance, would be quite different. He wanted a lot of detail, he wanted a lot of structure around how he could then best perform. So, again, an example for Matthew, we were playing Sri Lanka or Bangladesh in Cairns, and so coming into that game, he's kind of aware of their bowlers, basically what sort of lines they might bowl at him. So we then moved to a bowling machine rather than just bowlers, because what Matthew wanted always was repetition. So when you have bowlers, we term net bowlers, 3 or 4 net bowlers bowling a net, they're all going to bowl something different at every ball. So while that is more game-like in a sense, his first step always was to lay a foundation. So this foundation then was, we spent half an hour eliminating about 30 bowling machine balls because they were providing different bounce. So we got rid of those. The next half hour, bowling a certain line which he expected that he would get, he didn't play a shot, just got a feel for what that line was, where his stump was. And then he moved slightly more into line for the next half hour, so now it was a decision-making process about on that line, which one do I play, which one do I don't play, what type of shot can I play, what type of shot can't I play. And then the last half hour of the session was he moved into full line and then just started playing a range of shots where he would want to dominate. Then the next day he'd go and face the bowlers. If that reinforced the stuff that he was doing the day before, he would continue on. If it didn't, he'd pull out, and so that was enough. So I think that's kind of trying to get to where you, your question was, that it's so important for individuals to know their own game, for coaches to know their own game, and then prepare that in the context of the game coming up, so that when you arrive at the game, you feel as though you're as best prepared as possible. Then it's around, as we were talking before, around emotional levels, getting those about right for when you walk out, either to bowl or to bat or to field, and then knowing your routine that puts you in the moment to deal with whatever's there in front of you. And therefore, at that moment, your mind's clear because you're relying on your game plan and your skills to look after what's going to be in front of you.